she's an assistant DA, kind of a right-hand person as far as I know with Gascon, but she was charged with 11 felonies. And I would like for you to talk about what those felonies are, what the charges are, and why you're so intimately aware of the genesis of this entire case.
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said that when I took office, I started uncovering things that the establishment wanted to keep covered. And remember, up until I took office, every sheriff that preceded me was always part of the political establishment. Even Baca, even though they didn't like him at the beginning, but he did something very important that allowed him to be reelected 3 times after winning over Sherman Block. That he agreed to keep the county secrets, to look the other way when it was required, to not ask too many questions under obvious situations of corruption. They're begging for investigation. That was the implicit contract. You do that, and we're going to leave you alone. And that was Lee Baca. That was John Scott briefly. Then it was Jim McDonald. And now fast forward to the new guy, Robert Luna. That's exactly what he's doing. Look the other way, and we'll leave you alone. And when I took office, I did not work my way up through the political establishment where people had my pink slip or I owed something to anybody. No, I literally came from the line, retired, called out the guy, and defeated him. And I did it by actually campaigning on ICE in the jails, getting body worn cameras, transparency issues, making employment fair so people don't lose their job for political reason, but for actual facts, evidence. And that due process thing was important. I pushed for it. I got the Democratic Party to understand it. It was important. I got the unions, the Federation of Labor to understand it. And all of a sudden, as soon as I took office, oh my God, how dare he investigate Diana Turan or Max Huntsman, the Inspector General? Doesn't he know that that's a conflict of interest? I mean, you heard everything. But it turns out we stumbled upon this data breach by accident my first month on the job. And we called in the FBI, we called in the state attorney general, said, this is what we got. It's got a lot of legs to it. And we'd like to know if you want to investigate or we can investigate ourselves, because it involved employees of the department under the prior administration and the inspector general, a county appointee. They somehow believed that they were above the law. In fact, Max Huntsman just recently said that I don't have the legal authority to investigate him as the inspector general, which strange. I didn't see that in the state constitution, but that's Max Huntsman constitution for you. So they attorney general said, you know what, there's nothing stopping you from investigating this. Go ahead. The FBI said, well, we don't see a federal angle on this quite yet, but we'll lend you technical assistance. We're talking, this is back in January of 2019. I'd just been in office about a month. We start the process in good faith. We get to a point where we develop the information. We realize, wow, there's a potential criminal culpability from the inspector general, from Diana Turan, for unlawfully accessing and removing files from the department. Up to the weekend before I was sworn in, they were downloading files on the weekend on a zip drive, like under cover of darkness. That's how dirty it was. And we're
Now,
talking.
sure, I want to stop you there because I want people to understand. I've read quite a bit about this in preparation for the podcast. Can you explain what her purpose? Put that in quotes. What was her purpose? What was her reasoning for being inside the sheriff's department at that time?
She was a member of the Office of Policing Advisor for Jim McDonald, not working
Okay.
as an attorney, but as a consultant
Mhm.
and constitutional policing advisor. And that was something that we had the Office of Independent Review that preceded it. That was under Baca, and it kind of morphed over time. Then it separated into the Inspector General, Constitutional Policing Advisor for the Sheriff's Department, Civilian Oversight Commission, all that crap. And when we uncovered this and we realized, wow, this is illegal, because these are personnel files. And the personnel file, the very first one that was downloaded, was mine. I was a retired lieutenant running for sheriff. I was not the subject of any investigation, nor did I have any scandalous anything in my background. So what legitimate reason would Diana Turan have to download my files, or Max Huntsman, the inspector general? Political purposes only, which is illegal. And they did it for dozens of employees. It ended up being like 2,400 files, individual files, a massive data breach. We initiated investigation. At one point, when we developed enough information, I did my due diligence and I informed the board of supervisors, hey, we have this issue with these employees, former employees, and employees of the county engaging in this felonious conduct, that they're suspects, and we're investigating. Do your due diligence and relieve, do it, whatever the normal protocol is. They basically told me to pound sand. They kept them in their job knowing that they were felony suspects under investigation, which you know very well. Who does that? Because they're compromised at that point. And then from that, oh my God, a torrent of retaliation came out of the Inspector General Max Huntsman. And he started cranking out report after report that, oh my God, I'm a criminal. I did this, I did that. And I mean, it was kind of laughable, really, when you looked at what he was writing, but it was very clear there was retaliation for the fact that we had the audacity to investigate him. He thought he was above the law. Diana Turan actually was working at his behest, because we even have the emails where he's instructing her to, hey, go on the weekend and use the external hard drive and all that stuff to defeat a process that required the sheriff's approval written by signature, because we have a memorandum of agreement between the inspector general and the sheriff at the time, and it was very specific in what they could get and how they could get it, and they just blew that all by. So fast forward about 2 years later, we gave the case to the attorney general. We finished our investigation, gave it to them. I don't know what they did with it. I guess they they did some more investigation, and then they come up with a couple of weeks ago where they indicted Turan.
Yeah. Now, again, she was handpicked to come over to the DA's office by Gascon, and the allegations that I understand from these indictments are that some of these files that were allegedly illegally obtained have been used in the DA's office in the course of their investigations, filings, backgrounds. Now, so I mean, theoretically, this could be going uphill to a higher party. Now, one of the things I want to go back up a little bit is that if I understand, Sheriff, this was done partly under the auspices of Brady. And for people who don't understand Brady, this is to look into the integrity of officers for purposes of trial testimony and things like this. You know, the veracity in trial, and if they have been deemed to be dishonest, that their credibility can be impeached and things like this. Am I getting that right? Is that part of the reasoning for her being there and having any access to officers' files?
Well, she was in legal hot water prior because she decided on her own to create her own Brady list. She made a
Uh-huh.
list of 300 deputies. You may have heard about that. And ALAS, the
Yes.
deputies union, went to court and challenged that. And that went all the way
Mhm.
up to the California Supreme Court, and ALAS prevailed. Basically, the sheriff is not obligated to turn material over unless it knows and it generates it. In other words,
Right.
we're not supposed to go fishing for it. If it comes
Correct.
up, well, then we provide it, which we agreed with.
Mhm.
Okay, that's fine. It should be, that's the way it should be. And so she created her own Brady list on her own criteria.
Yeah.
And
This is it, I mean, it sounds like somebody, you know, they wanted had a predetermined outcome and with this. So do you know the relationship between Gascon and Turan? Do they have a previous relationship? I'm talking professional relationship.
not that I'm aware of, but you got to
Okay.
remember that she was publicly identified as a felony suspect way before Gascon decided to hire her in the DA's office. But she got bounced around because when I took office, we terminated her employment. She was a will employee. And then right away, the CEO's office picked her up, put her in the inspector general's office under Max Huntsman. And then
Hmm.
from there, she went to the public defender, I think. And then from there, she jumped over to the DA's office. So she was bouncing around this whole time when she really should have been just relieved of duty until
Yeah.
this was sorted out. That would have been the
And
ethical and appropriate thing.
it would have been, I think. And when you say identified as a felony suspect, or In other words, this was as a result of the investigation that you initiated that you're talking about. Is
Yes.
that right? That's right. In other words, there's information here that someone doesn't have to be found guilty of a particular violation, at least legally. This happens all the time in law enforcement administratively. You say, listen, our administrative investigation leads us to believe that you engaged in certain behavior that we can't work with, and so we're not going to hire you or we're going to fire you. You don't have to be criminally charged or certainly not criminally convicted in in order for some agency or entity to take the appropriate action, which you're talking about right now. So now we have this person who's under indictment. What do you think is the motivation of Bonta, the California Attorney General, to indict her, knowing that he is an ally of George Gascon?
Well, I'm gonna remember this is not the only case that he has in his docket. We also delivered him the case of Sachi Hamai, the former CEO who was given a pretty much a golden parachute of $1.5 million, where they falsely accused me of harassment of the CEO somehow. And she's a
Mhm.
public official. Her only recourse was actually to file a workers' comp claim, not get $1.5 million with no uncontested. So that for us, that was a crime itself, gift of public funds. We referred that matter to the AG's office. Then we have the Sheila Kuehl, Patty Giggins peace over violence investigation, which is a lot more evidence on that than they used to convict Mark Ridley Thomas, just to put it in
Yes.
perspective.